Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. Something that I think I take for granted is the fact that I will say, quote unquote, grew up in manufacturing. My first role in manufacturing was working with the site continuous improvement leader and implementing change. So what I learned is I was learning a lot of what we call lean manufacturing and how to run Kaizen events. So this is one of those Japanese words because we always like to use Japanese words for everything in lean. But what that really means is it's Kai, K-A-I, which means change, and Zen, which is like you think about like home, and Zen, which is like good. So it's like good change. So it is a way to implement change so that buy-in is just a given. And that is what we want to look for, because so many times I hear leaders, I'm working with clients, and we start talking about something that needs to get standardized. And they're like, yeah, I've got to schedule some time so I can work on that. And I've got to work on this. I've got to sit and figure out what that's going to look like. And I've got to establish this process, or there's something going on here, and I have to look at it. And that I have to look at it thing is wonderful and bad all at the same time. As leaders, we are very responsible for everything. There are, with great power comes great responsibility. And we have a lot on our plates. We have a lot of responsibility for leading the culture, leading the business, figuring out where we're headed, solving problems, all of that stuff. But we need to make sure we understand the difference between responsible for and doing the thing, particularly when it comes to change. A lot of times when we first get started, or even, a lot of times, I know I fell into this as a new leader, even though I came up in this sort of Kaizen culture. But you feel like responsible for means it was your idea, you rolled it out, you did all the things, and boom, it's yours, right? Like we confuse that sometimes. And when we feel like everything is ours to do, this is when we get bogged down. This is when we don't have time to do anything. This is when we just get stuck in all the day-to-day. And this is when we struggle to get buy-in from the team. So I want you to think about the last time somebody told you to go do something different. Maybe listening to the podcast here, right? Usually I try to give you a process to go do, right? So you're doing it your way. But let's imagine that I came into your house and I said, well, you're going to start doing your dishes this way, cooking your meals this way, and doing your laundry this way. What are your first thoughts? You're probably going, what? This is my area. Why are you telling me what to do in my space? I've got something that works and it's not broken. Why would I fix it? This works for me. All of that stuff. So you get almost instant pushback. Even if it is like the best thing since sliced bread, you're going to get pushback when you say you should do this or you are going to start doing this. Now, are there times when that has to happen? Yeah, of course. But is it the most effective buy-in proof way of getting things done? No, it is not. Because we as human beings, when we start doing things, we like doing them the way that we've done them. And change, especially when we don't understand why we're changing or we don't see that it's broken, but change is difficult. And that's because, I've talked about this a lot, but that's because our brains have to go on autopilot for things. And when we ask them to come off of autopilot, aka change, then we have to now bring it from autopilot to that active part of the brain to make the change. And when we do that, now that takes a lot of energy, that takes focus. And sometimes we don't want to do that stuff. And actually, our brain is wired to be a little bit lazy. So it's autopilot wants to come back in power, right? And so you can start a change but then it's so easy to slide back out of it. Now, the best way to combat that in the first place is to have the people that are going to make the change for themselves. Okay, so let's talk about this scenario with change process. So let's say you need to implement a new process for creating and filing invoices. Okay, so something's working, but maybe you're implementing a new system. All right, so typically what we think, okay, here's the system, here's the training documents, go figure it out. Okay, but there's always some kind of like an implementation process that has to go into place and like an SOP or standard operating procedure that needs to be developed. Many leaders that I work with sit there and try to say, okay, well, we're going to do this, then this, then this, then this, and there's your process. Here you go. Now go do it. But when we're trying to implement change, especially launching it to a group of people, we want to use this Kaizen approach, this good change approach. And what that looks like is you're bringing a team of people in and you're giving them a project. You're brainstorming how to do it. You're maybe mapping how to lay it out, and then you're rolling it out to everybody else. So you don't need the entire team involved in it, but you need some representatives of the stakeholders that are there. So what you'd want to have, it's like if there's a process here, you want to have somebody in the customer process involved. So somebody who's going to receive this new process to make sure we're meeting customer expectations. You're going to need 3 people-ish, right? Depending on how big the process is, but a handful, like a nice representation of the people who are actually doing the process. And you're going to need a supplier to the process. You may need, depending on what you're doing, the leader of it or like some people that have other inputs into it. And sometimes it can be helpful to have somebody who's like totally outside of it, who can have a very objective view, who is, or maybe has done something similar in their area, but they don't work in the area. That can be helpful, but sometimes it's hard depending on how complicated it is. So that's up to the nature of your business. So you're looking at like 3 to 5 people, right? So having those 3 to 5 people in, up to 7, I would say. Any more than 7, you've got too many brains and probably too many people not doing their day job. So you've got those people in and you're going to get some input from them. You're going to introduce the problem or introduce what needs to happen. So like the goal, so we're going to roll that out to them, have them discuss, figure out what's going on. Like maybe if it's the problem that you're solving, figure out the problem. So do some problem solving and then figure out what the solution is. And then they're going to figure out how they're going to implement it. So what do they need? What kind of tracking do they need? What kind of other systems will they need to support it? Who needs to get trained? All of that stuff, right? And the thing is this can happen very quickly. I still see people trying to piecemeal something like this. And they have a meeting, they have some conversation, and then they go away and nothing's happened. There's no clear actions. And they're like, gosh, and then they come back the next week or maybe 2 weeks later and they say, okay, well, here's where we left off the last time. What do we think about this? Who knows more about this now after 2 weeks of doing nothing? And who's done this? And how are we going to do this? And then they think about it some more. And so 6 months later, you haven't moved off the dime. You've had a lot of meetings. So you've spent a lot of hours talking about the same thing and nothing has moved. And people find this extremely frustrating, most of us, and nothing gets done. And it is a waste if nothing is getting done. But what you can do is using this Kaizen culture or Kaizen concept, bring people in for a couple of hours or a day, depending on what it is, right? It could be a 4-hour thing. It could be a 2-day thing. It could be, depends on what's the scope of this problem here, but bring them in together, give them the assignment, have them hash it all out that day and get the action plan. And if you can, get some stuff rolling, right? Just get it out there, get it done, and start working with the process as it is. Now you might, and you likely will have to have some kind of follow-up to do some other completion of actions or some training, or, maybe you've roughed in a system and you now need to finalize that system, or you rough it in and you trial it for 30 days or something like that, make sure it works, then you get the final process put in place. So you're going to have action plans that happen, but having a meeting about an action plan is much faster and less frustrating, as long as people are doing their actions, than having a lot of meetings where you're just pontificating and talking, and it's much more efficient. So as leaders, we are always looking for much more efficient ways to do it, right? We we can't spend all of our time doing these things. So the beauty of it doing it this way is that, number one, you're not sitting there doing it by yourself, then having to do the uphill process of rolling it out to a bunch of people that still don't know what you're talking about, don't see the problem, and aren't bought into the solution. Number two, when you book a meeting with people, now you have to do the thing, right? It's very easy to say, okay, that's, I want to get to that, but it just didn't bubble up to the surface yet. Or I want to get to that, but you know what? All these other things are more important because, I've got a meeting with this person and this one needs me. And now this customer has just called us. And so rather than kicking it down the road and not even starting it for a long time and then having it sit there and maybe you're going to work on it, maybe you're not, right? Now you've got a meeting, you've got other people committed and you're like, okay, I guess we have to do it because it's in the calendar for 5 people. So we best go do it. Otherwise it's going to mess up everybody's calendar. So those are all good things. But probably the most important thing is that sometimes, don't take this personally, but sometimes your ideas and your ideas alone are not always the best ones. I know, hard to accept sometimes, right? But you know how they say 2 heads are better than 1, all of that stuff. It is true because when we start talking about things, other people are going to bring their perspective in. And the best perspective is the perspective of the people who are doing the project, who do that work every single day. You may have done that work at some point prior to this point in time, but if you're not doing it every day, all day anymore, you're not the best resource on how to change it or how to implement something new to it. So you need to talk to the people and have those people who do it every single day involved in that change. So how do we do that? Okay, because that can feel scary to just kind of say, all right, you guys go make this change. How do we do that while making sure that certain processes are followed or that we don't totally lose control and they don't take it into some other outside of our standards or outside of the way we do business sort of way? All right, so this is what you do. I'm going to give you some steps because we all like steps, processes, all of that thing. All right. So the first thing you do is you very clearly define the scope of the project. So if it's a problem, you say, this is the problem that we need you to solve. Okay. And explain if there's any boundaries around it, like, start from here to here, ignore this, whatever that might be. So very clearly give them the scope. Now, I want to warn you, scope creep is real. It happens all the time. We start to throw in extra things. We try to solve something that's maybe not in the scope that might be a step 2, 3, or 4 down the road. So be very clear as to what the thing that they need to do is. Okay, so figure out what that project is. Then bring your people in. So now when we're talking about the people, I've mentioned this already, but you want to have a handful of people. So 2 to 3. I like 3 because you get 1, that's just one person's opinion. You get 2, maybe they're the 2 people that think this way. Get a 3rd person, you've probably got a good input. So 2 to 3 people that do the thing every day. Right? If there's only one of them, there's only one of them, right? A customer person, so someone who's going to receive the thing. If it's an actual customer and it goes outside, maybe you have the salesperson or maybe you have a rep who's close to that customer, that kind of thing. You can bring an actual customer in though. That is a thing. You just have to understand that you have a good relationship with that customer. Then you want somebody who supplies the information, like who do they need to get stuff from? Because sometimes how we're supplied information has a big reason for why we do certain things. So you want to bring somebody in who gives the information to that process. So suppliers, customers, and the doers of it. If there is a leader over them, so maybe that's you or maybe that's somebody else, you might want to bring them in too, because if they have to uphold it and make sure it happens, then they need to be there. So you've got the team. You've got the problem. Now you need to kick them off. Okay. So you can do something that is called a scope document. I usually recommend doing this if you're going to do it, like and it's a more complex sort of process, you might want to do it prior to the actual problem solving day. And this is where as a team, we can very clearly say, here's the start of it. Here's the stop of it. These are the things we're going to ignore. These are the things we're going to include. And the reason we do that with more than just 1 or 2 people is because then everybody gets it. If you've ever taken a training class with me, we set expectations at the beginning of each one, and then we annoyingly look at them each time. Okay, so why do we do that? We do that because we need to make sure we're on the same page. I set out my expectations. Everybody else brings in their additional expectations, and we make sure we understand what that means. It's the same thing when you're talking about problems and processes and launching new things. We need to understand and make sure everybody is clear on what's happening. Okay. So you get that in there. You make sure everybody gets that scope and doesn't try to scope creep it. You put someone in charge. Okay. This someone might be you. This someone might be a third party. This someone might be the leader of the team that's trying to make the change. Or it might be somebody who's maybe shown some potential and, really cares about this project and wants to carry it through to the end. Working genius style wise, G people are great at this. D people are great at this. Sometimes E's and T's struggle with this. Okay. But T's can sometimes if they don't have a strong E that's, holding them back a little bit, but T's can be great people for it too. People who might struggle with it, W's, because they don't want to hold people accountable. People with G in their frustration, they don't want to push people. So just looking at those people, like what you know about your team, right? Put somebody in charge. Okay, that person is going to own the process, make sure that they follow a problem-solving sort of process, going to keep that team together, going to keep them on track, that kind of thing, and make sure they stay in the scope. All right. If you're not the leader that's in charge, then you need to establish some check-in times. So you definitely want to be there at the beginning to make sure they understand, the scope. What is allowed to change? What isn't allowed to change? Where their freedom is. Okay. Like let's put an example in. Let's say you're an automation design company. You probably want your engineers to do it in the best way possible. Sometimes it's very creative. Sometimes it's very standard, but you probably have some things that are standards, like maybe use Motoman robots, maybe use Allen Bradley controllers, maybe use a certain type of circuitry loop for doing something or other. Like if there are stipulations, make sure they know what the stipulations are. And when there aren't stipulations, make sure they know they've got freedom for that. Okay. So that is a huge way to help. So once you've kicked them off, now you're going to want to establish some check-in times. Yes, you have somebody kind of in charge, but you want to check in through the day, get them to kind of, tell you where they are, tell you what they've bumped into, just so you have a good feel for what's going on, making sure they're staying on the scope. They're staying within the areas that are supposed to change or need to change and not creeping into the areas that need to stay the same. And then you're going to need to be in there to make sure their solution is there. So you're going to come to some kind of a presentation of the solution or, have them show you the final product. All right. So be there for that and then be there to support as they're doing any follow-up action sort of plans in whatever way that needs to be done. So if it's, attending some meetings, if it's getting a report out from the leader from the team, however that looks, but you have to establish some kind of a check-in point to make sure it stays on track. So I want to give you a warning here. The biggest culture killer, brainstorm creativity killer is to send people off to go work on something and then have them come and present this idea they're super excited about and then say, oh, well, that doesn't work. That's not going to work for us because you didn't do this, this, and this. So you need to be clear about what's allowed to change and what isn't. And if it kind of feels like nothing's allowed to change, then maybe we need to be introspective onto what we're rolling out here, right? Because again, our ideas aren't always the best, right? Some people have different ideas that will work. So what happens if you do end up there? Okay, so what do you do if, they've come and the solution is maybe it's not aligned with what needs to stay the same. Maybe you don't think it will work, or maybe it won't work, or maybe it costs too much. Okay, so the first thing you want to do if this happens is understand how they came to this point, right? So, so I see you've done this. I know you've put a lot of time into it. Tell me about how you came to that conclusion. What problems did you run into? What solutions did you look at? So ask them some questions to get some understanding. We need to understand how they came to this concept so that we can understand what it is they're trying to tell us and start to understand what they really think it's going to look like, because sometimes people don't present things in the clearest way, right? So we want to really understand what they're saying and how they think it's going to work and how they think it's going to go. So after you've asked those questions, if you still say, this is not the thing that this isn't going to work for whatever reason. You are the leader and you have that right, and that is okay. Just the way you get them to change is sometimes needs a little tweaking, right? So first we get that understanding. And then if you still believe it's not the right one, you have two options of your next step. So you can either, the first option is you're essentially telling them to go back to the drawing board and tweak something, change something, etc. So what you'd want to do is be very specific with them about what is working about what they've presented and what is not. So say, hey, this is great. However, this area here isn't, or this area here does not align with what we spoke about, or I don't understand how this is going to work, right? So you can send them back to the drawing board with some very specific to-dos. If and when you do this, you will have some disappointment, right? So being clear about what's working and what does work or what is aligned and what is not is important here. The second one is perhaps it's not violating of anything, but maybe it's not what you wanted it to be, right? It's not what you thought the solution was. So you could be open to running it that way and seeing if it works. Okay. And this is up to you. This is right. Does this make sense for you and your business? Is this safe to do it this way? Right. So you could allow them to run it in this way for a period of time and see how it goes. But be clear about, okay, well, let's check this. And that's just kind of great when we start something new. That's a great way to do it anyway. Either way, either option that you choose in this, you need to be very clear in your communication about what is good, what is not. And you need to see and understand what went wrong in the communication between what the project was, what the scope was, what the need to stay the same things were, and the okay to change things were, and understand where the streams crossed, right? Like what wasn't clearly understood and how do we make sure that doesn't happen in the future? So when we can understand that, then we can get better at doing this the next time around. So to wrap all of this talk up, when you have something that needs to change, what you need to do, I'm telling you what to do, what the best way to do it is to get a group of people together who use the system or use the thing, or will have some kind of, it will impact them in some way. Get that group together to figure out what the process is or to solve the problem, and then they can implement it. I'll wrap up with the story. This is one of my favorite coaching stories that I've got. So I was coaching an individual who was in one of my leadership programs, and we were learning about coaching. So one-on-one coaching sit downs. And he's like, I'm trying to do this, but where I struggle is that my to-do list gets huge. They have these ideas that they come in with, and they always want to do them, or they want to see them get done, but I don't have time to do all these things. And it's like, I just asked him a very simple question. I said, why does it always have to be you? And it was like a light bulb went off, and he said, tell me about that. And we talked about this process. I said, if they come with the idea, if they want to redo their entire storeroom and you're okay with that, you have the time to allow them to do it, then let them run with it, because they're the ones using it every single day, right? You're not. You just come in and you see things. As long as they're getting the parts out the door and it makes sense, it should work. So he went away, he let them do it, and it came back as done. And he's like, well, it wasn't the way I would have done it, but it seems to be working, and they do it. So, and then I didn't have to do it. So it was awesome. So the change got done. It made the team happier because they got to do the idea they had, and it works. And he's not chasing people around because they came up with the idea of how to do it. So I love that story because it just brings all the things together, right? Like the empowering people to do their ideas and to implement it, that communication between the team as a whole and with the leader, and that letting things go a little bit, because sometimes it's very hard to let things go. And once we do, and we see that it's okay, it will all be fine, then our team gets better, our processes get better, and our business gets better. So if you enjoyed today's episode, like it, share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe, because that is how we can continue to learn, continue to get better, and continue to improve. And I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.